"Sir, we need you to move. This seat is for our actual VIP passengers." The words didn't slip out by accident. They were delivered like policy, cold, certain, and rehearsed. Vanessa Miller, senior flight attendant for Premium Airways, stood in the first-class aisle of Flight 847, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her lips pressed into a thin line of authority. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't hiding. She said it loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. She looked right at him, at the black man in seat 3A, and decided right then and there that he didn't belong. What she didn't know was that in exactly 28 minutes, the man sitting calmly before her would ground not just this flight, but every single Premium Airways plane across the country. Before we get into this true story of power accountability and what happens when the wrong person is humiliated, tell me where you're watching from. Comment your city below. And if this moment stopped you in your tracks the way it did the passengers around him, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Now let's rewind to how this moment started. The air in Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2 hummed with the frantic energy of a Monday morning. Premium Airways Flight 847 to San Francisco was already showing a 20-minute delay on the departure board. The gate area buzzed with irritated business travelers checking watches and tapping at phones. First class had been called, and the priority passengers were lining up their expressions a mix of entitlement and impatience. Among them stood Jonathan Reynolds, his presence somehow both commanding and understated. His tailored navy suit bore no flashy labels. His leather portfolio was well worn but impeccably maintained. He didn't push to the front. He didn't demand attention. He simply waited his turn, boarding pass in hand, eyes calmly surveying the scene around him. "Now boarding our Platinum Elite members and first-class passengers for Premium Airways Flight 847 to San Francisco," the gate agent announced, her voice cutting through the ambient terminal noise. Jonathan stepped forward, scanned his boarding pass, and walked through the jet bridge with the measured pace of a man who was exactly where he belonged. Jonathan Reynolds had earned everything he had. At 43, he stood as the CEO and founder of Horizon Technologies, one of the most innovative companies in the AI ethics industry. But his journey there had been anything but easy. Born to a high school math teacher and a nurse in Baltimore, Jonathan had shown a brilliant mind from an early age. His parents had sacrificed to send him to the best schools they could afford. He'd earned scholarships, worked part-time jobs, and eventually graduated with honors from Howard University with a degree in engineering. His path from graduation to founding his own company had been marked by both brilliant innovation and painful barriers. There had been the investors who wouldn't meet with him until a white colleague made the introduction, the promotions that went to less qualified peers, the security guards who followed him through high-end stores, even when he was wearing his best suit. Jonathan had faced it all with a quiet dignity that became his signature strength. "Never let them see you lose control," his father had told him. "Your anger, no matter how justified, will always be used against you." So Jonathan had learned to channel that energy into something more powerful: strategic excellence. When he founded Horizon Technologies 8 years ago, he didn't just want to create another tech company. He wanted to change how technology impacted people's lives, especially those from marginalized communities. His AI ethics platforms now helped major corporations identify and eliminate biases in their automated systems. Jonathan preferred flying commercial despite having the means for private travel. "Keep your feet on the ground," he often told his executive team. "The moment we isolate ourselves from the everyday experiences of the people we serve is the moment we begin to fail them." Today's flight was particularly important. Jonathan was heading to San Francisco to deliver the keynote address at the Global Technology Ethics Summit. His speech, "Accountability in the Age of Automation," had been months in preparation. He'd be addressing thousands of the industry's most influential leaders. As he settled into seat 3A, Jonathan placed his portfolio in the overhead compartment and his phone on the armrest. He glanced at his watch, a simple Timex his father had given him upon graduation. Some habits of punctuality ran deep, and Jonathan had built his reputation partly on his meticulous planning and reliable timing. 2 decades earlier, Jonathan had been flying to his first major job interview after college. He'd saved for weeks to buy a business class ticket, believing the quiet space would help him prepare his thoughts. Before takeoff, a flight attendant had approached and asked him to move to economy because there had been a mistake. There was no mistake. He'd seen his seat reassigned to an older white businessman minutes later. The humiliation had burned, but he'd moved without protest. He'd needed to reach that interview, and causing a scene risked everything. Never again, he'd promised himself that day. And he'd kept that promise, building a life and career where his presence couldn't be questioned, where his worth couldn't be dismissed. Or so he thought. Jonathan took a deep breath as other first-class passengers filed past him. He nodded politely to the elderly woman who took 3C across the aisle, opened his tablet, and began reviewing his keynote notes. He was so absorbed in his work that he barely noticed when the Harringtons boarded. William and Elizabeth Harrington entered the first-class cabin like they owned it, and in their minds, perhaps they did. Both 55, both executives at First Capital Bank's Chicago headquarters, they flew this route twice monthly. William's steel-gray hair was expensively cut, his tailored suit a silent broadcast of wealth. Elizabeth's blonde highlights and tennis bracelet completed the picture of privileged ease. They were Platinum Elite members and made sure everyone knew it. William stopped abruptly at row 3. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone not actually asking for forgiveness. "I believe you're in our seat." Jonathan looked up calmly. "3A, no, this is my assigned seat." He held up his boarding pass as evidence. William's face tightened. "There must be some mistake. We always sit in 3A and 3B when we fly to San Francisco. Always." Elizabeth leaned in. "It's our usual seats. We're Platinum Elite members." Jonathan nodded politely. "I understand, but this is my assigned seat for today's flight. Perhaps the airline changed your usual arrangement." William's face flushed. "This is unacceptable." That's when Elizabeth caught the eye of Vanessa Miller, the senior flight attendant who had been watching the exchange. With 15 years at Premium Airways, Vanessa prided herself on recognizing the airline's truly valuable customers. The Harringtons definitely qualified. This other passenger, well, he wasn't a regular. And something about him sitting in first class didn't quite fit the picture in Vanessa's mind of who belonged there. Elizabeth's whispered conference with Vanessa lasted just seconds, but the outcome was immediate. Vanessa approached seat 3A with the confident authority of someone used to having her directives followed. "Sir," she began, her voice professional but cool, "I need to ask you to move. There seems to have been a mistake with the seating assignments." And that's where our story truly begins. Jonathan looked up from his tablet, making direct eye contact with Vanessa. "I'm sorry, but there's no mistake. I specifically reserved seat 3A when I booked this flight 3 weeks ago." Vanessa's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Sir, we have some very important regular customers who always sit in these seats. We can move you to another first-class seat, or if necessary, we can accommodate you in our premium economy section with appropriate credit." William Harrington stood by, arms crossed, his expression making it clear he expected this situation to be resolved quickly. Elizabeth had already placed her designer handbag on seat 3B as if the matter was settled. "I understand they may be regular customers," Jonathan replied, his voice level and calm. "However, I booked and paid for this specific seat. My boarding pass confirms it, and I've already settled in." Vanessa's professional demeanor slipped just slightly. "Sir, our Platinum Elite members take priority in these matters. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington fly with us every week." "That may be so," Jonathan said, "but seat assignments aren't based on frequency of travel once they've been confirmed. They're contractual." William stepped closer, his voice dropping to a stage whisper that was clearly meant to be heard. "Do you know how much money we spend with this airline each year? Platinum Elite isn't just a title. Jonathan remained seated, his posture relaxed but firm. I'm an Executive Sapphire member myself, though I don't see how that's relevant to assigned seating. Vanessa's eyebrows rose slightly in doubt. Executive Sapphire was Premium Airways' second highest tier, and Jonathan didn't match her mental image of their typical high-status traveler. May I see your membership card? She asked, the skepticism evident in her tone. Without breaking eye contact, Jonathan reached for his wallet and produced the black card with the Executive Sapphire emblem. Vanessa took it, examined it with slightly too much scrutiny, and handed it back. Nevertheless, she continued, we need to sort this out. The Harringtons have specific seating requirements that were somehow overlooked. What requirements would those be? Jonathan asked. Elizabeth interjected, medical necessities. Window seating is essential for William's comfort during flight. Jonathan glanced at William, who appeared perfectly healthy and now slightly uncomfortable with his wife's claim. If it's a medical necessity, I'm sure the airline has it documented and would have blocked this seat from being available when I booked it. Vanessa's smile vanished completely. Sir, I'm trying to find an amicable solution here. We can offer you 5,000 bonus miles for the inconvenience of moving to another seat. I appreciate the offer, Jonathan said, but I'll stay in my assigned seat. If Mr. Harrington has medical needs, I suggest you check if any other window seats are available, or perhaps you could ask if another passenger would be willing to move. William's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? Jonathan's expression remained neutral. No, sir, I don't. Just as you don't know who I am, which is precisely why seat assignments exist. Other first-class passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed interested in the drama, and a few were carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone involved. Sir, Vanessa said, her voice now carrying a warning edge. I need to advise you that being uncooperative with cabin crew can make this flight very difficult for you. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air. Jonathan recognized it immediately for what it was, the kind of warning that carried different weight depending on who received it. He'd heard similar words before, had seen how quickly situations could escalate when black passengers were labeled uncooperative or difficult. Are you threatening me with poor service or some form of retaliation because I won't give up my assigned seat? Jonathan asked, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel beneath it. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. Of course not. I'm simply explaining our policies regarding passenger cooperation. I'd be very interested to see the written policy that requires passengers to surrender their confirmed seats to others based on loyalty status or regular travel patterns, Jonathan replied. Jonathan, Elizabeth Harrington let out an exasperated sigh. This is absurd. William, call Thomas. William nodded and pulled out his phone, stepping slightly away to make a call. The implication was clear. They were escalating this to someone with authority. Vanessa leaned closer to Jonathan. Sir, I'm trying to be reasonable here. We value all our passengers, but surely you can understand that our long-term customers deserve certain considerations. I understand customer loyalty programs perfectly, Jonathan replied. They offer upgrades when available, priority boarding bonus miles, and other perks. They don't entitle anyone to take another passenger's assigned seat. Vanessa straightened up. Wait here, she said curtly, before turning to head toward the front of the plane. As she passed Elizabeth, they exchanged a look of mutual understanding. The Harringtons remained standing in the aisle, creating a bottleneck as other passengers tried to board. William was still on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Elizabeth maintained a pointed stare at Jonathan, as if her disapproval alone might force him to vacate the seat. Jonathan returned to his tablet, outwardly composed but internally documenting every detail of the interaction. He was well aware of how these situations typically played out, and he had no intention of becoming another anecdote about accommodation and appeasement. The growing tension in the cabin was palpable as Vanessa returned with Kevin Anderson, the gate agent. Kevin was 36, with the harried look of someone whose customer service smile was wearing dangerously thin by mid-morning. Sir, Kevin began, I understand there's a seating issue. We'd like to offer you a seat in our premium economy cabin with a partial refund of the fare difference and 10,000 bonus miles for your inconvenience. There's no seating issue, Jonathan replied. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. The issue appears to be that you've made promises to other passengers that you can't fulfill without displacing me. Kevin's smile tightened. Sir, sometimes we need to make adjustments for our highest-tier passengers. I'm sure you understand. What I understand, Jonathan said, is that I purchased a specific seat on this flight. That seat was confirmed, and now you're asking me to accept less than what I paid for because someone else feels entitled to my seat. It's not about entitlement, Elizabeth cut in. It's about loyalty and recognition. Jonathan looked directly at her. Would you be making the same argument if you were the one being asked to move from your assigned seat? Before Elizabeth could respond, William returned from his phone call looking smugly satisfied. Thomas Baker from corporate security is on his way. He'll sort this out. The mention of security caused several nearby passengers to look up in alarm. The implied escalation, that security would be called over a seating dispute, carried uncomfortable connotations that weren't lost on Jonathan or on several observers. You called security because I won't give up my assigned seat, Jonathan asked, his voice deliberately loud enough to be heard by surrounding passengers. No one called security on you, Kevin quickly clarified, aware of how this looked. Mr. Baker is our corporate customer relations specialist. He helps resolve complex situations. Jonathan nodded slowly. I see. And is it standard procedure to call in special personnel when a passenger insists on sitting in their assigned seat, or is this service reserved for particular passengers? The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone within earshot. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged among the flight crew and some passengers. It was at this moment that the first observers began to take particular notice of what was unfolding. In seat 2C, Sofia Rodriguez, a technology journalist for Digital Frontiers magazine, discreetly activated the recording function on her phone. Across the aisle in 3C, Michael Thompson, a retired airline executive, watched with growing concern, his experienced eyes noting every procedural violation occurring. In row 4, Dr. Gabriela Martinez, a psychology professor specializing in workplace dynamics, observed the power plays unfolding with professional interest. And standing near the galley flight attendant, Tyler Wilson, 28, watched his senior colleague with visible discomfort, his conscience clearly troubled by what he was witnessing. The stage was set. The players were in position. And as Thomas Baker made his way onto the aircraft, no one, not Vanessa, not the Harringtons, and certainly not Premium Airways, had any idea what the next 28 minutes would bring. Thomas Baker strode onto the aircraft with the confidence of a man accustomed to resolving conflicts through presence alone. At 44, the former military man carried himself with rigid authority, his Premium Airways corporate security badge prominently displayed on his dark suit jacket. What seems to be the problem here? He asked, directing his question to Vanessa rather than to any of the actual participants in the dispute. This gentleman, Vanessa explained, gesturing to Jonathan, is refusing to accommodate Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, who are Platinum Elite members and regular passengers in these seats. Thomas turned his attention to Jonathan, his expression professionally neutral but with an underlying assumption of authority. Sir, I understand you're in seat 3A. We're asking you to relocate to help accommodate our loyal customers. Jonathan met his gaze steadily. And I've explained that I purchased this specific seat. My boarding pass confirms it. I'm already settled and there's no legitimate reason for me to move. Thomas lowered his voice, leaning slightly closer. Sir, we'd prefer to resolve this amicably. Making this into an incident won't be beneficial for anyone involved. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Jonathan was well aware of how quickly situations like this could escalate, how easily a difficult black passenger could find themselves removed from a flight, delayed, or even arrested. all for standing their ground on a legitimate right. Around them, the cabin had grown quieter as passengers tuned in to the developing situation. In seat 2C, Sofia Rodriguez continued recording discreetly. As a tech journalist who frequently covered ethics in technology and business, she recognized the dynamics at play. Her Argentine-American background had taught her plenty about subtle discriminations and power imbalances. "Excuse me," came a voice from across the aisle. Michael Thompson, the 62-year-old retired airline executive in 3C, had decided to speak up. "I couldn't help but overhear. Isn't it standard airline policy that assigned seats are contractually guaranteed unless there's an aircraft change or safety issue?" Thomas turned slightly surprised by the intervention. "Sir, we appreciate your concern, but this is being handled according to Premium Airways procedures for our elite passengers." "I was Senior Operations Director for Continental for 15 years," Michael replied calmly. "I'm not familiar with any major airline having a policy that allows displacing a passenger from their assigned seat based on another passenger's status level. That would violate DOT regulations." Thomas's expression tightened. This was no longer a simple case of pressuring a single passenger into compliance. There were now witnesses actively engaging, including one who clearly understood airline operations, from row 4 doctor. Gabriela Martinez observed the shifting dynamics with interest. As a psychology professor specializing in organizational behavior, she recognized the classic patterns of authority being challenged and the resulting defensive posturing. She remained silent for now, but her attentive gaze missed nothing. William Harrington, growing impatient, interjected, "This is ridiculous. We fly this route every 2 weeks. Everyone knows 3A and 3B are our seats. We shouldn't have to deal with this inconvenience." The slight pause before inconvenience carried unmistakable undertones that caused several nearby passengers to exchange glances. Jonathan had remained remarkably composed throughout, but now he reached for his phone. "I think it's time I made a call." "Sir, we're about to depart. Phones need to be in airplane mode," Vanessa said quickly. "We're clearly not about to depart while this situation remains unresolved," Jonathan replied. "And I believe I'm entitled to contact my office regarding this treatment." Before Thomas could object further, Jonathan had dialed and placed the phone to his ear. "Lisa." "Yes, it's me. I'm still on the ground in Chicago." A pause. "Yes, exactly what we discussed might happen. Premium Airways Flight 847 to San Francisco. I need you to initiate Protocol 6. Another pause. "Yes, full documentation. Thank you." The call was brief, but its effect on Jonathan was visible. A subtle shift in his posture, a renewed confidence in his already steady gaze. He disconnected and turned his attention back to Thomas. "May I see your employee ID, please?" Jonathan asked. Thomas blinked, thrown by the unexpected request and the calm authority with which it was delivered. Almost automatically, he turned his badge toward Jonathan. "Thomas Baker, corporate security ID number 87542. Jonathan noted aloud. "Thank you. And you are here officially representing Premium Airways in this matter?" "Yes, of course," Thomas replied, increasingly uncertain about the direction this was taking. Jonathan nodded. "That's good. I want to be absolutely clear about who is involved in this situation." From his position near the galley, Tyler Wilson watched the exchange with growing anxiety. As the junior flight attendant, he had seen Vanessa and the Harringtons pull this routine before. Usually passengers caved to the pressure. Those who didn't were labeled difficult and often found their flight experience mysteriously uncomfortable. He'd stayed silent previously, telling himself it wasn't his place to intervene. But something about today felt different. Elizabeth Harrington, sensing the situation slipping out of their control, tried another approach. "Look, we're all reasonable people here. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. We're simply used to certain accommodations when we fly." Jonathan turned to her. "Mrs. Harrington, with respect, this isn't about getting off on the wrong foot. This is about an assumption that your status entitles you to displace another passenger from their legitimate seat and about the airline staff supporting that assumption through implied threats and security presence. Sofia Rodriguez had to suppress an appreciative smile. As a journalist, she recognized a perfectly crafted statement when she heard one, clear, factual, and impossible to dismiss as emotional or exaggerated. William, less tactful than his wife, scoffed. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I'm on a first-name basis with half the board of this airline." Jonathan's expression remained neutral. "No, Mr. Harrington, I don't know who you are, just as you made assumptions about me without knowing who I am." Something in Jonathan's tone caused Thomas to pause. A creeping suspicion that had been forming since the phone call now took more definite shape. "Sir, may I ask your name?" "Jonathan Reynolds," he replied simply. Thomas's expression didn't change immediately, but Sophia, who had been watching closely, caught the moment of recognition in his eyes. Michael Thompson, too, straightened slightly in his seat at the mention of the name. Vanessa, missing these subtle cues, pressed on. "Mr. Reynolds, we've offered you alternatives and compensation. At this point, you're delaying the entire flight." "No," Jonathan corrected her. "The decision to challenge my legitimate seat assignment is delaying the flight. I'm simply maintaining my rights as a passenger." The standoff continued, tension building in the cabin. Other passengers were now openly watching some recording on their phones. The situation had escalated beyond a simple seating dispute into something that felt increasingly significant. Thomas's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then did a double-take at the message displayed. His posture changed instantly. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you privately." "We're in the middle of resolving this," she replied, annoyed. "Now," Thomas insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. As they stepped away toward the galley, William Harrington checked his own phone. Whatever he saw caused his florid face to pale slightly. He showed the screen to Elizabeth, whose expression shifted from smug certainty to confusion, then to dawning concern. In the momentary lull, Dr. Martinez leaned forward from row 4. "Excuse me, Mr. Reynolds, Dr. Gabriela Martinez. I just wanted to say I admire your composure in this situation." Jonathan turned slightly to acknowledge her with a nod. "Thank you, Doctor. Unfortunately, practice makes perfect." The simple statement carried volumes of meaning that weren't lost on those listening. Before the conversation could continue, Captain Eric Davidson emerged from the cockpit, his expression serious. At 58, the veteran pilot had seen his share of pre-flight disruptions, but the message he'd just received from operations was unprecedented. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the first-class cabin, "I apologize for the delay. We seem to have a situation that requires resolution before departure." William immediately stepped forward. "Captain, we're the cause of the delay, and I apologize. There's been a misunderstanding about seating that we need to address." The abrupt change in William's tone was striking. Gone was the entitled demand, replaced by an almost deferential concern. Captain Davidson looked between William and Jonathan. "I understand there's a dispute about seat 3A. "There's no dispute," Jonathan clarified. "This is my assigned seat. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington want me to move because they consider these seats to be customarily theirs. The airline staff have been pressuring me to comply, including involving corporate security." The captain's expression remained professional, but a slight tightening around his eyes suggested his thoughts on the matter. "I see. And you are Mr. Jonathan Reynolds?" "I am." Captain Davidson nodded once. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of Premium Airways, I want to apologize for any inconvenience. You are, of course, entitled to your assigned seat." The shift in the cabin's atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Vanessa, returning from her hushed conversation with Thomas, looked stricken. The Harringtons exchanged alarmed glances, and throughout the first-class cabin, passengers who had been watching the drama unfold now leaned forward, sensing that something significant had just changed. What none of them yet realized was that this was merely the beginning. The next 20 minutes would reshape not just this flight, but the entire airline. Captain, Vanessa interjected, her voice slightly higher than normal. Perhaps we could discuss options that would satisfy everyone. Captain Davidson gave her a look that silenced further suggestions. The matter of the seat assignment is resolved. Mr. Reynolds will remain in 3A as per his ticketed reservation. William Harrington, now visibly anxious, attempted to salvage the situation. Captain, if I may, perhaps we've all overreacted a bit. Elizabeth and I would be happy to take any other first-class seats available. That's very accommodating of you. The captain replied, his tone making it clear he found the sudden change in attitude notable. Mr. Anderson will help you find appropriate seating. Kevin, the gate agent, who had been hovering nervously in the background, stepped forward. Yes, we have 5A and 5B available. Elizabeth nodded quickly. That would be fine. Perfect, actually. As the Harringtons moved toward their new seats, whispers rippled through the cabin. Something had clearly shifted, but most passengers couldn't pinpoint exactly what. In seat 2C, Sofia Rodriguez was piecing it together faster than most. As a tech journalist, she was familiar with Jonathan Reynolds and Horizon Technologies. She leaned slightly toward Michael Thompson across the aisle and whispered, "That's Jonathan Reynolds of Horizon Technologies, the AI ethics company." Michael nodded, his expression knowing. And if I'm not mistaken, Horizon has a significant investment position in Global Air Partners. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. Premium's parent company. Precisely. The implications were beginning to cascade through the cabin as recognition spread. Dr. Martinez observed the changing social dynamics with fascination, how quickly power could shift when hidden status was revealed. Captain Davidson turned to Jonathan. Mr. Reynolds, again, my apologies for the disturbance. We'll be ready for departure shortly. Thank you, Captain, Jonathan replied. However, I'm concerned about the pattern of behavior demonstrated here. This isn't about my personal comfort anymore. The captain's expression was carefully neutral. I understand. If you'd like to file a complaint, we can ensure it reaches the appropriate. I've already initiated more direct measures, Jonathan interrupted politely. As I'm sure you're now aware. A tense silence followed this statement. Captain Davidson nodded once. I see. In that case, I'll need to contact operations for further instructions. As the captain returned to the cockpit, Thomas Baker approached Jonathan, his demeanor transformed from authoritative to deferential. Mr. Reynolds, I want to personally apologize for the misunderstanding. If there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable. The issue isn't my comfort, Mr. Baker, Jonathan replied evenly. The issue is a culture that allows and enables discriminatory treatment. I'm curious, how often does this scenario play out with passengers who don't have the leverage to fight back? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I couldn't say, sir. Couldn't or wouldn't? Jonathan pressed. Before Thomas could respond, Tyler Wilson stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. It happens regularly, he said quietly. With the Harringtons specifically, and with several other Platinum Elite members. Vanessa shot him a look of shocked betrayal. Tyler? That's completely inappropriate. Is it? Tyler challenged, surprising even himself with his boldness. Or is it inappropriate to tear up someone's boarding pass, which I've seen you do, or to lose the luggage of passengers who complain, or to ensure certain passengers get the cold meal option or the bumpy section of the aircraft? The stunned silence that followed was broken by Sofia Rodriguez, who had stopped pretending not to record. I'd be very interested to hear more about these practices, Mr. Wilson, Sofia Rodriguez, Digital Frontiers magazine. Tyler looked momentarily panicked at the realization that his words were being documented by a journalist, but something in Jonathan's steady gaze gave him courage. It's time somebody said something, he said more to himself than anyone else. From row 4, Dr. Martinez spoke up. What you're describing is a textbook case of institutional bias where certain passengers receive preferential treatment at the expense of others, often along demographic lines. That's absolutely not true, Vanessa objected. We treat all our passengers with respect. Do you? Jonathan asked quietly. Would you have called security if I were a white businessman in a bespoke suit? Would you have questioned my executive sapphire status? Would you have threatened that my flight might become difficult if I didn't comply? Vanessa had no answer. At the back of first class, William Harrington was frantically typing on his phone, his face ashen. Elizabeth leaned close to him, whispering urgently. Their previous confidence had evaporated completely. Kevin Anderson's radio crackled. He listened to the message, then approached Jonathan with newfound respect. Mr. Reynolds, our regional manager Sarah Johnson is on her way to the aircraft. She'd like to speak with you. I'll be happy to speak with her, Jonathan replied. Though I should mention that my conversation with my executive assistant has set certain processes in motion that may be beyond Ms. Johnson's authority to address. Kevin swallowed nervously. Yes, sir. We've been made aware of that possibility. Throughout the cabin, the atmosphere had transformed. Passengers who had been passive observers now watched with rapt attention, sensing they were witnessing something historic. Some had begun quietly sharing information about who Jonathan Reynolds was, his company's mission, and the potential implications of his involvement. In the corporate headquarters of Premium Airways, 20 miles away, an emergency meeting was being hastily assembled. Executive assistants were frantically pulling senior leadership from other meetings. The legal department was reviewing documents at record speed, and in a secure server room a notification had just pinged on a monitor, Protocol 6, active. Sarah Johnson arrived on the aircraft 7 minutes later. The 46-year-old regional manager was polished and professional, though the slight sheen of perspiration on her forehead betrayed her anxiety. She approached Jonathan with an outstretched hand and a practiced smile. Mr. Reynolds, I'm Sarah Johnson, Regional Manager for Premium Airways. I want to personally apologize for any misunderstanding today. Jonathan shook her hand, but didn't return the smile. Ms. Johnson, I appreciate your prompt arrival, but characterizing discrimination as a misunderstanding rather diminishes the issue, doesn't it? Sarah's smile faltered. Of course you're right. The treatment you received was completely unacceptable. The treatment was symptomatic of deeper issues, Jonathan corrected her. Issues that affect countless passengers who don't have the platform or power to address them. By now, most of the first-class cabin and many in the main cabin were openly watching and listening. Sofia Rodriguez was still recording, as were several other passengers. The Harringtons had shrunk into their seats in row 5, William still frantically messaging someone. Sarah lowered her voice. Mr. Reynolds, I understand you've initiated some corporate actions. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. I don't believe privacy serves the public interest in this case, Jonathan replied at normal volume. Too many of these incidents happen behind closed doors, allowing them to continue unchecked. From the cockpit doorway, Captain Davidson cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, I've just received communication from headquarters. They're requesting we delay departure until further notice. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. Yes, Captain. That's to be expected given the circumstances. The mysterious phone call, the deference suddenly being shown to Jonathan, the flight delay. Passengers were increasingly aware that something extraordinary was unfolding. The pieces were falling into place, and as they did, all eyes turned to the composed man in seat 3A, who had transformed from an obstacle to be removed into the apparent center of power in this unfolding drama. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Davidson announced, addressing the first-class cabin. I apologize for the continued delay. We're working to resolve some operational issues. I'll update you as soon as I have more information. The carefully neutral language didn't fool anyone who had been witnessing the situation. This was far beyond a typical operational delay. Sarah Johnson was still standing beside Jonathan's seat, visibly struggling to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to assure you that what happened today is not representative of Premium Airways values. We pride ourselves on—" "Ms. Johnson," Jonathan interrupted gently, "I think we're well past the corporate script stage. What happened today isn't an isolated incident, as Mr. Wilson has already confirmed." Tyler, who had been standing nearby, nodded nervously, but with growing resolve. "The Harringtons have displaced passengers from their assigned seats at least 6 times that I've witnessed personally, and they're not the only ones." Sarah shot Tyler a look that promised future consequences, but Jonathan caught it. "Retaliation against Mr. Wilson would be extremely unwise, Ms. Johnson. Whistleblower protections exist for a reason." Sophia Rodriguez, still recording, called out from her seat. "I'd be interested to know if Premium Airways has data on how frequently seat reassignments occur based on passenger demographics. Sophia Rodriguez, Digital Frontiers." "We don't comment on internal data," Sarah replied automatically. "That's not entirely accurate," Jonathan said. "Premium Airways will be commenting quite extensively on that data very shortly, I expect. Horizon Technologies has been analyzing patterns in service industry discrimination for the past 18 months. This revelation sent a visible shock through the Premium Airways staff present. Thomas Baker, who had been standing at a careful distance, paled noticeably. In row 5, William Harrington was now on a call, his voice a harsh whisper. "Frank, I don't care what meeting you're in. This is an emergency. Reynolds is here on my flight and he's—" He stopped abruptly, listening. "Yes, that Reynolds. The Horizon Technologies 1. More passengers were now openly recording the events. The story was too compelling, the power dynamics too fascinating to ignore. A sense of witnessing history pervaded the cabin. Captain Davidson returned from the cockpit, this time accompanied by his first officer. His expression was grave as he approached Jonathan. "Mr. Reynolds, I've just spoken with our COO. He's requested that I personally express the airline's deepest apologies and assure you that we're taking this matter with the utmost seriousness." "I appreciate that, Captain," Jonathan replied, "but I'm more interested in substantive action than apologies." "Yes, sir. I understand that your position with regard to our parent company gives you certain influence in that respect." And there it was, the first public acknowledgement of what was becoming increasingly clear to everyone. Jonathan Reynolds wasn't just any passenger. He held significant power over Premium Airways itself. Michael Thompson, the retired airline executive, chuckled softly from across the aisle. "The board must be in absolute pandemonium right now." Sophia turned to him. "You think they didn't know who he was when this started?" "Oh, they absolutely didn't," Michael replied. "The frontline staff never get that kind of information. To them, he was just another passenger who didn't fit their mental image of who belongs in first class." Dr. Martinez nodded in agreement. "It's a classic case of cognitive bias reinforced by institutional culture. They saw what they expected to see based on ingrained patterns." Sarah Johnson was now visibly sweating despite the cabin's air conditioning. "Mr. Reynolds, would you be willing to meet with our CEO? He's very eager to discuss how we can address your concerns." "I'm already addressing my concerns, Ms. Johnson," Jonathan replied. "Protocol 6 is well underway." "What exactly is Protocol 6? Sophia asked, her journalist instincts fully engaged. Jonathan turned slightly toward her. "It's a response framework Horizon Technologies developed for situations where discrimination moves from theoretical to personal. Given our company's focus on identifying and eliminating bias in automated systems, we found it necessary to have equally rigorous processes for human systems." William Harrington abruptly ended his call and approached his previous arrogance, replaced by barely concealed panic. "Mr. Reynolds, I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Elizabeth and I never intended to cause any disruption. We simply—" "Mr. Harrington," Jonathan cut him off politely but firmly, "there was no misunderstanding. You and your wife attempted to use your status to displace me from my rightful seat. When I refused, you escalated by involving staff and security, making thinly veiled threats and demonstrating a pattern of behavior that suggests this is your standard operating procedure. Elizabeth joined her husband, her earlier disdain now replaced by an almost desperate affability. We're so embarrassed by this whole situation. We should have been more considerate. If there's anything we can do to make amends... This isn't about making amends to me, Jonathan stated. This is about addressing a culture that enables and encourages discriminatory behavior. From the PA system came the captain's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Davidson. I regret to inform you that our departure will be further delayed. Our ground staff will be coming aboard to assist passengers who wish to deplane while we resolve these issues. We apologize for the inconvenience. A murmur of confusion and frustration rippled through the cabin. Several passengers in the main cabin, unaware of the drama in first class, began to complain loudly. Sophia Rodriguez, still recording, asked, Mr. Reynolds, can you share what's happening behind the scenes right now? Jonathan considered the question before answering. What I can tell you is that Horizon Technologies holds a significant position in Global Air Partners Premium Airways' parent company. As a board member of Integrated Capital, which manages those holdings, I have certain responsibilities when I become aware of serious ethical breaches within companies we invest in. Sarah Johnson's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her professional composure cracked visibly. Mr. Reynolds, our CEO, Frank Williams, is requesting an immediate video conference with you. I'm afraid Mr. Williams will need to address the full emergency board meeting that's currently assembling, Jonathan replied. My executive assistant, Lisa Reynolds, has already provided all relevant documentation to the major shareholders. The implications of this statement seemed to hit everyone simultaneously. This wasn't just about one flight or one incident. The entire corporate structure of Premium Airways was now in motion. William Harrington, his face now ashen, whispered to his wife, He's going to sink the stock. Elizabeth clutched her designer handbag tighter. Can he do that? He controls or influences nearly 30% of the parent company's shares. William replied, no longer bothering to keep his voice down. He can do whatever he wants. Jonathan overheard this. It's not about what I want, Mr. Harrington. It's about accountability, something that's been notably absent in how Premium Airways handles these situations. At that moment, the aircraft door reopened. Several ground staff members entered, led by a worried-looking supervisor. Captain, we've received instructions to begin deplaning passengers who wish to make alternative arrangements. Thank you, Captain Davidson replied. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to deplane, our staff will assist you with rebooking on other carriers. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience. Most passengers remained seated, however, too invested in the unfolding drama to leave. Those in the main cabin who had been unaware of the situation were quickly brought up to speed by others, and soon the entire aircraft was buzzing with the story of the black CEO who'd been asked to give up his seat and was now apparently bringing the entire airline to its knees. Sarah Johnson's phone buzzed again. Whatever message she received caused her to inhale sharply. Mr. Reynolds, I've just been informed that an emergency press statement is being prepared. Is there anything we can do to address your concerns before that happens? Yes, Ms. Johnson, there is. Jonathan replied, his voice steady and clear. You can stop treating this as a PR crisis and start treating it as the human rights issue it actually is. The power had shifted completely. The man they had tried to displace was now effectively in control of the entire situation, the entire flight, and possibly the entire airline. And he had achieved it without raising his voice, without making threats, without doing anything more than standing his ground and making a phone call. The revolution, it seemed, would be polite, measured, and absolutely devastating. At Horizon Technologies' Chicago offices, Lisa Reynolds was orchestrating a precise, methodical response. The 37-year-old executive assistant moved with practiced efficiency, her decade of experience alongside Jonathan evident in every action. David, I need the shareholder documentation and voting proxies activated now. She spoke into her headset as she simultaneously typed commands into a specialized terminal. Jonathan has confirmed this is a Protocol 6 scenario. David Morrison Horizon's 52-year-old corporate counsel responded immediately. Already in progress. The emergency board provisions are being triggered for global air partners. We're pushing notification to all major shareholders. On Lisa's screen, a complex dashboard displayed multiple real-time metrics. One window showed Premium Airways stock price, which had begun to fluctuate as unusual trading patterns were detected by market algorithms. Another window displayed a rapid succession of encrypted messages being exchanged between various corporate entities. A third monitored social media, where the first mentions of a situation on Premium Airways Flight 847 were beginning to appear. Bring up the historical data, Lisa instructed, and a new window appeared showing patterns of customer service complaints against Premium Airways categorized by passenger demographics. The pattern is undeniable, David observed, reviewing the same data remotely. Premium Airways has a statistically significant bias pattern in how they handle seating disputes, upgrade requests, and complaint resolutions. And now they've provided us with a perfect case study, Lisa noted. Jonathan doesn't believe in coincidences, but sometimes the universe delivers exactly what you need precisely when you need it. Back on Flight 847, the systems Lisa had activated were now rippling through corporate structures, investment firms, and media channels. Jonathan sat calmly in seat 3A, the eye of a storm that was rapidly intensifying around him. Sarah Johnson's phone had not stopped buzzing with notifications. The regional manager was now engaged in a hushed, urgent conversation with Captain Davidson and Thomas Baker near the galley. Sophia Rodriguez seized the opportunity to approach Jonathan. Mr. Reynolds, Sophia Rodriguez from Digital Frontiers. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what's happening? Jonathan considered her for a moment. Ms. Rodriguez, what's happening extends far beyond this particular incident. For the past 18 months, Horizon Technologies has been developing an accountability framework for identifying and addressing patterns of discrimination in service industries. We've been particularly focused on airlines, hotels, and financial services, areas where subjective quality of service decisions often mask underlying biases. And Premium Airways was on your radar? Sophia asked, recording the conversation. Premium Airways is actually one of several carriers we've been monitoring. Today's incident simply accelerated our timeline for addressing the issues we've documented. Across the aisle, Michael Thompson nodded appreciatively. Brilliant strategy. Use your own experience as the triggering incident, giving you both data points and moral authority. It wasn't a strategy I hoped to employ personally, Jonathan clarified. But when the opportunity presented itself, I recognized it for what it was. William Harrington, who had been listening from row 5, stood up abruptly. This is absurd. You're deliberately causing a corporate crisis over a simple seating misunderstanding. Jonathan turned to him calmly. Mr. Harrington, your own words and actions today have demonstrated that this was neither simple nor a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attempt to use status and privilege to displace someone you deemed less worthy of their rightful place. I never said anything about worthiness, William sputtered. You didn't have to. Doctor, Martinez interjected from row 4. Your behavior communicated it clearly, as did Ms. Miller's immediate assumption that Mr. Reynolds couldn't possibly be an executive Sapphire member, and Mr. Baker's assumption that intimidation was an appropriate response to a legitimate seating dispute. Vanessa Miller, who had been standing silently nearby, looked stricken. The public deconstruction of her actions was clearly hitting home. Tyler Wilson stepped forward again. Mr. Reynolds, I want you to know that many of us have been uncomfortable with these practices for years, but speaking up seemed impossible. The culture punishes dissent. I understand, Mr. Wilson, Jonathan replied. Changing entrenched cultures requires leverage. Today, we have it. Sarah Johnson returned from her huddle, her professional demeanor barely holding together. Mr. Reynolds, I've just been informed that all Premium Airways flights nationwide have been placed on a temporary ground hold." A collective gasp went through the cabin. Even Jonathan looked momentarily surprised at the speed of the response. "All flights," Sophia confirmed her journalist's instincts, recognizing the magnitude of the story. "Yes," Sarah admitted reluctantly. A system-wide review has been initiated." Jonathan nodded. That would be Phase 2 of Protocol 6, a comprehensive operational pause to allow for immediate policy assessment and intervention. The implications were staggering. Hundreds of aircraft, thousands of passengers, and entire airline's operations, all ground to a halt because one man had been asked to give up his seat and had said no. Elizabeth Harrington, who had been silently watching her husband's continued meltdown, finally spoke up. "This is a disproportionate response to an unfortunate incident. You're affecting innocent passengers across the country." "What would have been proportionate, Mrs. Harrington?" Jonathan asked. "Should I have quietly moved to another seat? Accepted partial credit for my downgrade? Allowed the pattern to continue unchallenged as it has for years?" Before she could respond, Captain Davidson approached. "Mr. Reynolds, I've received direct instructions from our CEO. He's asked me to personally extend his deepest apologies and to inform you that he's willing to implement any changes you deem necessary to address the issues you've raised." "Captain, please tell Mr. Williams that I'm not interested in private apologies or promises. What's needed is structural change, transparency, and accountability. The emergency board meeting will address those requirements." The captain nodded clearly, understanding that the situation had escalated far beyond his authority to resolve. "Yes, sir. I'll relay that message." William Harrington, watching his influence evaporate in real time, made one last desperate attempt. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this company's value to shareholder equity? This tantrum could cost millions." Jonathan turned to him with a steady gaze. "Mr. Harrington, I understand finance quite well. In fact, discriminatory practices are not only ethically wrong, but financially unsound. They create legal liability damage, brand reputation, and erode customer loyalty. What you're seeing isn't a tantrum. It's accountability in action. Something that benefits shareholders in the long term, even if it causes short-term discomfort." Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. "It's a necessary disruption of a dysfunctional pattern. Systems rarely change without significant pressure." Sarah Johnson's phone buzzed yet again. She checked it, then approached Jonathan with renewed urgency. "Mr. Reynolds' CEO Frank Williams is being called before the emergency board meeting. He's asking if there's anything he can do or say before he faces the shareholders." Jonathan considered this. "Tell Mr. Williams that honesty would be his best approach. The data speaks for itself. Attempting to minimize or justify the patterns we've documented will only make his position worse." Throughout the cabin, passengers were now openly discussing what they were witnessing. Some were on their phones spreading the story to friends and social media. Others were engaged in intense debates about the ethics of Jonathan's approach versus the discrimination that had triggered it. In row 7, an elderly black woman who had been silently observing the entire scene finally spoke up, her voice carrying surprising strength. "I've been flying this airline for 40 years. Been treated like a second-class citizen more times than I can count. About time somebody did something about it." Her statement was met with murmurs of agreement from several passengers, including some who might have been skeptical of Jonathan's actions initially. Sophia Rodriguez, still documenting everything, asked Mr. Reynolds what happens next in your protocol. "Phase 3, Jonathan replied. "Structural intervention. The board will vote on leadership changes and implementation of a comprehensive accountability framework. This isn't punitive, it's corrective." As if on cue, Sarah Johnson's phone lit up again. Her face went pale as she read the message. "Mr. Reynolds?" she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "I've just been informed that Frank Williams has been asked to step down as CEO effective immediately." The news rippled through the cabin. The CEO of a major airline had just lost his position because of what had started as a seating dispute on one flight. "Who's taking over?" Sophia asked immediately. "Laura Martinez from Operations has been named interim CEO," Sarah replied. She's requesting permission to address the passengers on this flight directly via the aircraft communication system." Jonathan nodded. "I think that would be appropriate." Captain Davidson, who had been standing nearby, returned to the cockpit to arrange the connection. Minutes later, the PA system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen of Premium Airways Flight 847, this is Laura Martinez, interim CEO of Premium Airways. I want to personally apologize for the unacceptable treatment Mr. Reynolds experienced today, and for the resulting disruption to your travel plans. What happened reflects serious failures in our culture and practices failures that we are beginning to address immediately." Her voice was clear, direct, and devoid of the corporate doublespeak that so often characterized such communications. "All Premium Airways flights have been temporarily grounded while we implement emergency training and policy changes. We recognize this is causing significant inconvenience, and we will be providing full refunds, rebooking assistance, and additional compensation to all affected passengers. More importantly, we are committed to ensuring that the discriminatory practices that led to this situation are eliminated from our company." The candor of her statement was striking. No minimizing, no excuses, just clear acknowledgement and commitment to action. "Mr. Reynolds, if you're listening, I want to thank you for holding us accountable. The changes you've initiated today will make Premium Airways better for all our passengers and employees. That's all for now. Further updates will be provided as we move forward with these changes." The PA system clicked off, leaving a momentary silence in the cabin before conversation erupted again. William and Elizabeth Harrington sat in stunned silence, the full impact of their actions finally sinking in. They had triggered a chain reaction that had reshaped an entire corporation in less than an hour, all because they couldn't accept that someone else had legitimate claim to their seats. Jonathan remained composed in 3A, outwardly calm, but internally processing the rapid developments. This was Protocol 6 working exactly as designed, swift, comprehensive, and irrevocable. The systems that Lisa had activated were now fully engaged, catalyzing changes that would have taken years of advocacy to achieve through conventional channels. As passengers began to deplane, many stopped by Jonathan's seat to express support or share their own experiences with discrimination in travel. The solidarity was organic and powerful, a spontaneous community forming around a shared recognition of injustice and the rare opportunity to witness its correction in real time. The revolution had begun with a simple assertion: "This is my assigned seat." It was culminating in the complete transformation of a corporate giant, and it had all happened in exactly 28 minutes. 1 week after the Flight 847 incident, the transformation at Premium Airways was already evident. Laura Martinez had assembled a diverse leadership team committed to implementing the accountability framework in full. The airline had resumed operations with new protocols in place, and the initial feedback from both passengers and employees was cautiously positive. In the Premium Airways Training Center, a new module was being rolled out to all customer-facing staff. The video began with Laura Martinez addressing the camera directly. What happened on Flight 847 revealed patterns of behavior that violated our stated values, but had nonetheless become normalized within our culture. Today we begin the process of realignment, ensuring that how we actually operate matches the principles we claim to uphold. The training didn't shy away from uncomfortable truths. It included data on disparate treatment based on race, gender, and perceived status. It featured testimonials from passengers who had experienced discrimination, their stories presented not as accusations, but as learning opportunities. Most powerful was the segment featuring Tyler Wilson and other employees who had witnessed problematic patterns, but hadn't felt empowered to address them. "I knew it was wrong," Tyler explained on screen, "but I didn't think I could do anything about it. the culture rewarded those who prioritized certain passengers and punished those who raised concerns. The training emphasized the new reporting mechanisms and the protections in place for employees who spoke up. It made clear that customer satisfaction would no longer be measured primarily by the experiences of a select few, but by equitable treatment for all. At Horizon Technologies, Jonathan Reynolds had returned to his normal schedule, though normal now included regular updates on the implementation of Protocol 6 at Premium Airways. The accountability framework had been designed as a template that could be adapted for other industries, and inquiries were already coming in from companies eager to get ahead of similar issues. Lisa Reynolds provided Jonathan with the latest update during their morning meeting. The Independent Oversight Committee has completed its first review cycle. They've identified several additional areas for improvement, particularly in how Premium Airways handles complaints and compensates passengers affected by disruptions. "And the response from leadership?" Jonathan asked. "Surprisingly positive," Lisa reported. "Laura Martinez has embraced the feedback and is already implementing the recommended changes. She seems to genuinely understand that this isn't about avoiding PR disasters, but about building a more equitable system." Jonathan nodded with satisfaction. "And the employee reporting mechanism?" "Usage is increasing weekly as trust in the system grows. They've already addressed several situations that would likely have escalated into major incidents under the old culture." The most surprising development had been the response from other airlines. Initially wary and defensive, watching Premium Airways stock recover and customer sentiment improve had led to a shift in industry perspective. Several major carriers had quietly reached out to Horizon Technologies about implementing similar frameworks. The ripple effects extended to the Harringtons as well. William had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation at First Capital Bank. Elizabeth had resigned from her charity board positions as scrutiny of their behavior intensified. Their social standing, once unassailable, had collapsed under the weight of public accountability. Sofia Rodriguez had published a comprehensive analysis of the incident and its aftermath in Digital Frontiers, examining the intersection of technology ethics and accountability. Her piece had gone viral, establishing her as a leading voice in the growing conversation about corporate responsibility and bias. "What Reynolds demonstrated," she wrote, "was that addressing discrimination doesn't require sacrificing business success. In fact, the transparency and accountability measures implemented at Premium Airways have already improved operational efficiency and customer satisfaction across demographics." Dr. Gabriela Martinez had incorporated the case study into her university courses on organizational psychology, using it to illustrate how systems could be designed to encourage ethical behavior rather than relying solely on individual virtue. "The genius of the accountability framework," she explained to her students, "is that it aligns corporate interests with ethical practice. It makes doing the right thing the path of least resistance." Meanwhile, at Premium Airways headquarters, Laura Martinez was reviewing the preliminary data from their first month under the new framework. Passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment had decreased significantly. Employee reporting of problematic situations had increased, allowing issues to be addressed before they escalated. The initial stock hit had been followed by a steady recovery as investors recognized the long-term benefits of addressing these issues proactively. "The numbers tell a clear story," Laura told her executive team. "Equitable treatment isn't just ethically right, it's good business. We're seeing higher customer satisfaction across all demographics, improved employee morale, and reduced liability exposure." The most meaningful feedback, however, came from passengers who had experienced Premium Airways both before and after the changes. Comments poured in through the new feedback system. "For the first time, I felt like my comfort was as important as anyone else's. The flight attendant asked if everything was to my satisfaction 3 times. That's never happened to me before. I watched a seating dispute handled with complete professionalism and transparency. Everyone was treated with the same respect." These small but significant shifts indicated that real change was taking root. It wasn't perfect. Cultural transformation never is. but the trajectory was clear. 5 years after Flight 847, Jonathan Reynolds found himself once again in Seat 3A on a Premium Airways flight from Chicago to San Francisco. The airline had been transformed in ways both visible and subtle. From the diverse staff to the new training protocols to the independent accountability office that reviewed every complaint and commendation, Premium Airways had become a model that other companies were actively studying and emulating. As Jonathan settled into his seat, he reflected on the journey. Protocol 6 had expanded far beyond its original scope, evolving into what industry publications now called the Reynolds Framework, a comprehensive approach to institutional accountability that was being implemented across sectors and industries. A flight attendant approached his seat. "Mr. Reynolds, welcome aboard. It's an honor to have you flying with us today. Is there anything I can get you before takeoff?" There was nothing performative about her greeting. No special treatment being offered because of who he was, just the same professional courtesy extended to all passengers. This, perhaps, was the most meaningful evidence of real change. "I'm fine, thank you," Jonathan replied with a smile. "Just a water once we're airborne." As other passengers boarded, Jonathan noticed something that would have seemed unremarkable before Flight 847, but now carried profound significance: the natural diversity of the first-class cabin. Passengers of various backgrounds moved through the space with the quiet confidence of belonging, no longer needing to brace themselves for subtle challenges to their presence. A young black woman in her mid-20s took the seat across the aisle. She arranged her belongings efficiently, pulled out a laptop emblazoned with engineering stickers, and began reviewing what appeared to be technical documents. After a moment, she glanced up and did a double-take. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, "but aren't you Jonathan Reynolds from Horizon Technologies?" Jonathan acknowledged that he was. "I'm Tanya Brooks," she introduced herself. "I'm an engineer at Tech Fusion. I just wanted to say, what you did 5 years ago mattered, not just at Premium Airways, but everywhere." "It changed things for people like me." "I appreciate that," Jonathan replied. "But the real change came from all the people at Premium Airways who embraced the opportunity to build something better." Tanya nodded. "Still, it took someone standing firm to create that opportunity. My mentor told me about similar experiences she had traveling for business in the 90s, but back then there was no mechanism for accountability. You just endured it and moved on." This simple conversation encapsulated what Jonathan had come to recognize as the most significant outcome of Flight 847, the ripple effect that extended far beyond one airline or one industry. It had sparked conversations about dignity and respect in workplaces, schools, healthcare facilities, anywhere people interacted within institutional structures. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Jonathan found himself thinking about his father, who had passed away 6 months earlier. Their last conversation had returned to the lessons of dignity and strategic patience that had shaped Jonathan's approach to navigating a world not designed for his success. "You did something I always hoped would be possible," his father had told him. "You changed the rules of the game, not just how you played it. That's the real legacy." That legacy was evident in the messages Jonathan still received regularly, from employees who felt empowered to speak up about problematic patterns, from customers who noticed subtle but significant improvements in how they were treated, from executives who had initially resisted the accountability framework, but now championed its principles. As Jonathan prepared to land in San Francisco, he reflected that perhaps the most powerful catalyst for change is simply the courage to stand firm when it matters most. The revolution had indeed been polite, measured, and absolutely devastating, not to Premium Airways as an institution, but to the patterns and assumptions that had undermined its potential. In their place had emerged something stronger, more equitable, and ultimately more successful by every meaningful measure. And it had all begun with a simple assertion: "This is my assigned seat." 5 words that had changed an industry and inspired a movement, proving that sometimes the most powerful transformation starts with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable. If you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination in your travels or daily life, share your story in the comments below. Has someone ever stood up for you, or have you stood up for someone else? We want to hear about it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Remember, change begins when we refuse to move, when moving would be easier but wrong. Your voice matters, and your dignity is non-negotiable.